Hey everybody, welcome to a special bonus episode of the podcast, a bonus Q&A for GAA players. So if you are a Gaelic footballer, hurler, ladies footballer, or camogie player, and you're playing the Irish national sport, if you're listening and you're in the US or Canada or North America, and you're like, what is GAA? It's the national sport in Ireland in terms of the umbrella, but we're going to be covering Gaelic football, hurling, ladies football, and camogie in today's episode with some popular questions that have been sent in through my Instagram page recently. My preseason GAA Lean Body program starts this Monday, January 20th. If you are listening to this the Friday, Saturday, Sunday before it comes out, and it's going to be the last program for a while. I'm closed my BKF online program. My non-GA program is now closed. We are moving that into an app with hopefully going to have a soft launch on the founding members or founding members is the right word, in either March or April, and likely the GA program will be the same. So if you're looking to work directly with me with the weekly check-ins, the coaching, I would recommend signing up for this program on Monday, because when we move it into an app, it's likely we're going to pull that out of it. The details will be in the link below. If you are playing Gaelic football, hurling, ladies football, or camogie, and you are looking to get stronger, fitter, faster, but also change your body composition, building muscle, losing body fat, toning up, etc. So without further ado, we will jump into the first question targeted for GA players today. How to ensure full recovery between sessions. So something I didn't mention in the introduction, on the GAA Lean Body podcast, which is actually linked in the description for today's podcast, there are, I think it's 67 episodes on there, some of them Q&As, some of them solo episodes covering topics, and some with guests, either influencers, sports nutritionists, S&C coaches, inter-county players, etc. So I'll put the link in the description above. If you're not subscribed to that, I highly recommend you check it out. You can binge listen to that, and even in the creation, although my GAA Lean Body program starts on Monday, if you listen and binge listen to all those episodes, you can actually probably put most of it together yourself in terms of how to lay out your program and your nutrition. But when it comes to recovery, I did a very popular episode on there talking about optimizing recovery and overtraining, and the importance to understand the overtraining spectrum, because when it comes to recovery between sessions, you're looking at a macro in terms of the bigger picture, and you're looking at a micro, how you're recovering day to day between sessions. The macro is that you have your training phases in different splits. So for example, and I'll use myself as an example in my program, but again, lots of coaches, most S&C trainers will do something similar here. In my phase one of my GAA Lean Body program, it's very intense. Even the beginner program, the intermediate version of the program, there's different programs based on positions, based on goals, etc. But it's intense all the way through, because what we do is we do strategic overreaching. So if you think about your overtraining spectrum, when you've gone into full-blown overtraining or central nervous system fatigue, where your performance is negatively impacted and things like body composition can be harder to maintain, i.e. body fat levels can rise, lean muscle tissue can go down, etc. You're in full-blown overtraining. What's actually quite useful is what's called strategic overreaching. It's where you push past where you're able to go so that you're improving fitness levels ahead for the season. So a lot of preseason coaches will either directly or indirectly do this. So if you've gone back to football or hurling or ladies football or camogie, and you've been doing, say, sprints, when you go back in January on like a heavy pitch, that's strategic overreaching. It's, you haven't done any of this work in the past few months. We're now pushing you past what you can do to get your fitness levels up quicker. That's strategic overreaching. So when it comes to recovery, you need to look at it in a macro over the course of a season. Those 6 weeks in the phase one of the GAA Lean Body program, I coach on those programs. So it ensures that I'm able to make sure that people aren't overdoing it or underdoing it, so that they've got this sweet spot. It's why you see really good before and afters, really good testimonies from that program, is because I'm monitoring it as it goes through, as opposed to just saying, here's the program, go do it yourself. And with the phase two of that, it's self-guided. There's no coaching from me, there's no weekly check-ins. And the phase two is easier. It's more strength-based, there's longer rest periods, and that's designed intentionally because you can rotate the phase one and phase two of the program throughout the entire season. And then if you've done that, I have what's called a GAA Lean Body graduate program. If you've ran through the program for an entire season, you can move on to the graduate, which is an S&C, strength and conditioning, injury rehabilitation, body bulletproofing your body style program so that you don't get injured. So there's phases in which it builds upon. And if you are looking to optimize your recovery and design your own program, you need to be mindful of that there's periods in the season when you can push hard and there's periods when you need to scale back. So most players will be looking to peak around championship time, whether that's going to be in May, August, September. It really depends on inter-county, your county that you're living in, how the county team is doing, etc. And you're looking to peak around championship time. But what you do in January, February, March is you can push it quite hard. You don't have an awful lot of games, it's mostly challenge games, mostly training sessions. So you can go really intense with your gym sessions, with your pitch sessions, etc. And then in around April, you'll have a bit of a back off time, that April, May, where you'll effectively work as a mini deload, where you're tapering back the intensity in your training, and that's helping you re-peak coming into the summer. So that's the macro approach. I would imagine from the way the question was worded, you're talking about micro recovery between sessions. So this is a lot more straightforward because it's in your control day to day, and you don't need to have a master's in strength and conditioning to design a program. You don't need to have a master's in strength and conditioning to design a program, but it's a little bit trickier if you're not working in it as a professional. Sometimes you need a coach or a program or somebody that's experienced in that area to support you if you're new to this. But you can do it yourself. You can listen to my GAA Lean Body podcast. There's other great trainers out there. Listen to some of the guest episodes, follow the ones you connect with most, and again, learn from them. That's a really good way to do it and design it yourself. With the day-to-day, you're looking at your nutrition, you're looking at your sleep, and you're looking at your training program. So your nutrition is going to be very important. So one of the most neglected areas, and we'll talk about this in the next question about the best meal to eat after a hard gym session or pitch session, is your post-workout nutrition. And in most cases, and we'll get onto this in more detail next, you're looking at a complex carbohydrate and a protein source, but also your nutrition and your recovery between sessions will be dependent on the difficulty of the sessions. So a mistake a lot of players make is they don't look at the pre and post workout nutrition, or they don't look to optimize that. And the second is they don't consider the difference between an intense sprint-based pitch session or a leg session and going into the gym and pumping up your arms with some biceps and triceps. They're completely different system loads for your body in terms of what you're going to need calorie-wise, how you're going to need to replenish glycogen stores. So you need to make the adjustments accordingly. So for example, if you've done a very intensive sprint session or a very difficult leg workout, the GAA Lean Body program, the leg workout in there is probably it is the most difficult session in that whole plan. You need to be ramping up your carbohydrates to replenish glycogen stores after that. You need to be carb loading potentially before, but definitely carb reloading or replenishing after, because you're burning through all the carbohydrates in your system in that style of workout. If you go into the gym and you're doing a little bit of Pilates, or you're doing a stretch, or you're doing some biceps and triceps, you're not going to have the same load or the same requirements for calories or carbohydrate. So you need to make sure that you've got the general rule of thumb is that between 300 and 500 grams of carbohydrate per day for a GAA athlete. Again, depends on if you're 70 kilos versus 100 kilos, but the general rule of thumb in terms of mapping out how much you need per kilogram of body weight. I have a full episode on carb loading on the GAA Lean Body podcast and how to calculate how many grams of carbohydrates you need based on your starting point body weight. So you can check out and listen to that episode too. So you want to look at your nutrition overall. Your protein will be the next thing, where you've got your 1 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight minimum, so that you're recovering between sessions, but also the type, your whey protein, your protein powders, they're fast absorbing amino acids. They're fast absorbing styles of protein, so that you're, after tearing down a load of muscle fibers with your sprints or your leg workout or your gym session, you need to replenish and get some of those amino acids back quickly. It's the upside and benefit that something like whey protein has over, say, a piece of chicken. They're both complete protein sources, meaning all the essential amino acids are in both, but the speed at which they get into your system is different. Whey protein is going to be considerably faster than a piece of chicken that needs to be absorbed, digested, etc., or digested, absorbed, etc. So look at that. Look at your sleep. Again, similar to your nutrition, your sleep requirements don't remain stagnant. A good rule of thumb is to aim for 8 hours every night. But if you've had an exceptionally intense session, you might want to look at maybe 9 hours on that night. The same as a rest day or a non-stressful day where you're not doing anything. You probably get away with 7.5, maybe even 7, depending on your starting point, your age, etc. So experiment with that. Look at your nutrition. Look at your training. Look at your sleep, look at your training in terms of the deload. If you need to take a rest day, listen to it. You can use things like, a Whoop device. I'm a big fan of Whoop, particularly for GAA players. I also have episodes linked for Whoop and how to use it as a GAA player. I had Ronan Jones on, who is a Meath footballer, talking about how he uses Whoop. And that's one to look into. It's my personal favorite for GAA players in terms of tracking metrics. So go check out that podcast too if you need to. And then the final thing is going to be your physical recovery, your cold exposure or ice baths, your rolling or myofascial release, your trigger point, your deep tissue, your stretching, etc. It's like a tip of the iceberg or the cherry on top. All those strategies are amazing. I'm a big fan of myofascial release, different styles of rolling to reduce the perceived pain levels in your legs so that you can feel looser going out onto the pitch so that your performance is higher, especially if you're an older athlete. It's something I'll come back to again later. But they're the cherry on top, as I mentioned. Sometimes people are using massage guns, vibrating rollers, compression boots, cryotherapy without looking at their sleep and their nutrition, which is a waste of time. It really is. Your sleep and your nutrition are 80% of it. The next 15% is going to be your training load, possibly even more. And then the last 5% is your recovery, your stretching protocol, your rolling, your massage guns, etc. So building those in, but get the order right and the priority right, will help you with recovery between sessions. Question 2, best meal to eat after a hard gym or pitch session. The rule of thumb here is a good complex carbohydrate and a good complete protein source. So this is going to be down to personal preference. Complex carbohydrates, sweet potato, porridge oats, quinoa, brown rice, basmati rice, etc. All good options. Complete protein sources, chicken, fish, any poultry actually, and all fish. Red meat, although it's a little bit fatty, you tend to go with a leaner one just because after training sessions you want to replenish glycogen stores fast, and you want a protein source that's going to hit your system quickly for recovery. So a really easy one here, and one you can take with you and throw in your training bag, is oats and protein, so that you mix 50 to 100 grams of oats with 1 to 2 scoops of whey protein, depending on your weight, depending on your goals, depending on your starting point. That's a really easy thing to throw in your bag, and then within 90 minutes you've got a good solid meal. You've got your chicken and your sweet potato, or you've got your, maybe that's where you'll put in your steak or your salmon or your mackerel, and some baby potatoes or brown rice, etc. General rule, as I mentioned, is complex carbohydrates, but in this window of time you can get away with more simple sugars. It depends on your goal. If you are an athlete who's just looking to optimize recovery and you don't have any secondary body composition goal, simple sugars can work well here. This is where cereals will come in, cereal bars. Some people use like Rice Krispie bars, etc. It's simple sugars to replenish glycogen stores very quickly after training. So if you think of your glycogen stores, which is your carb stores, if you have a 2-liter water bottle, you want to replenish that and fill it up as fast as possible. That's what your glycogen stores are like, what's your carb load is like, or your carb replenishment is like, so that you're able to perform, say the next day, you got a game the next day, pitch session the next day, gym session the next day, etc. So with my GA players, something I try and word with them is there's no real rest days, it's just recovery days. When you're an athlete, you don't have a rest day, you have a recovery day. And what that tends to do is people are a bit more militant with their supplementation, a bit more militant with their protein intake. They can be more militant with their carbohydrate intake, considering the fact they might have a hard session the following day, and they don't just pause on a rest day. They keep the program going, and that's what gets them such good results, is what improves performance, body composition, mental performance, because you're doing everything that you need to do underneath, and all of those things add up. So with the best meal to eat after a hard gym session or a pitch session, there's some best practices, but mix and match for personal preference. Question 3, any tips for knee pain? So I'll preface this with, if you have any injury, a physiotherapist is always going to be the person you want to speak to first and get diagnosed and potentially a rehabilitation plan off them. What I'll say here with knee pain, because it's a very common issue with GA players, you tend to have ankles and knees, sometimes hips and lower back are very common injuries. You want to look at what's aggravating it and then scaling back slightly, and then also pair that with what gives it temporary relief. So for example, if you have knee pain because your IT band is tight, you might do myofascial release or foam rolling on that IT band. It doesn't fix the underlying issue. What it does is it reduces the perceived level of pain that you feel, so that you can do a rehabilitation plan around it, so that you're actually able to not have that knee pain in future. A mistake a lot of people make when they're on a foam roller is they're going up and down going, oh yeah, my foam roller is going to fix my knee pain, it's fixing my IT band, when in reality your IT band could be tight because your glutes aren't activating correctly or your hamstrings are too tight. So all the foam roller should be doing, or if you're doing it correctly, what it should be doing is alleviating that pain, so that you're actually able to do some single leg work, that you're able to do some direct glute work or some bands to strengthen up that muscle and get it activating and firing faster. So you're looking at the underlying issue. If you have a history of knee issues, i.e., you did your ACL, you have a meniscus tear, etc., you need to be very careful, because this is all about load management, and this is where I can help you as a coach. Load management is where you're gradually increasing the difficulty of movements and increasing the load so that your body is prepared for a twist, a turn, or a jump when you mimic and get out onto the pitch. So what this might look like is, if you have knee pain and you're just trying to strengthen it up in general, you're going to do whatever the rehabilitation strategy is. The reduction in perceived pain, you might do things like ice or ice baths or cold, which are all analgesic, meaning that they'll reduce your perceived level of pain so that you're actually able to do the rehabilitation or the gym workout to support this. You'll build and progressively overload the movement. So a really simple example of this would be something like a plyometric on a box. You might have a low box that you jump onto first, and then over the space of a week, 10 days, you build into a higher level box, and then you might have a single leg where you're going onto the low box with a single leg, then a single leg onto a high box, and then it might be where there's a combined movement. So it might be a static jump then into a single leg, so that you're building on over 6, 8, 12 weeks, depending on your injury. You're gradually increasing the load on the knee and your body's, or how your body lands on that side. And again, then when you would add in something like lateral movements, twists, etc., so that you're mimicking what you'd be doing on the pitch. That's also a misconception, or misconception isn't the correct word, a regular mistake GAA players make is they'll do their plyometrics, which I'll talk about in the next question, but they do them all in one motion. They do them forward, their plyometrics onto a box, their single legs onto a box. You need to do lateral movements as well, so side to side. So ice skaters weighted, or ice skaters, or using a plyometric beam where you're jumping from side to side, or even just jumping from one leg to the other and going in a straight direction, or a forward broad jump where you're jumping far in front. Lots of different plyometrics you can do, but again, you build up gradually to these. In the GAA Lean Body program, I keep everything in one plane of motion to begin with. We then slightly progress that into phase 2, and then in the graduate program, which is effectively a phase 3, there's more lateral movements that get added in. So again, it's about building it in the right order so that you're getting the most from it from a performance standpoint, you're reducing your risk of injury, and you're getting exactly what you want from your plyometrics. Question 4. The best plyometrics for my pre-season plan. So to build on what I talked around the knee pain, as I mentioned, talk to your physio. That's always going to be your first protocol. Although S&C coaches can be really helpful with the umbrella that I fall into in terms of the bracket. If you have an underlying issue or an injury, you need to go to the right person. I also get people say, oh, I'm going to go to my doctor. Generally, if you have a knee pain as an athlete, you need a good physiotherapist. They're also not all created equal. There's some tremendous physios out there, so do your due diligence, ask around to see that. But when it comes to plyometrics for your pre-season plan, I tend to see two primary mistakes, and they're both actually really obvious when I say them. One is way too many plyometrics, and the other is way too little. And when I think of plyometrics for GAA players, I always think of the Goldilocks zone. If you've heard the story, Goldilocks with the porridge, one is too hot, one is too cold, one is just right. Plyometrics are like a Goldilocks zone, because when you are overdoing plyometrics, and overdoing normally comes in the form of the volume being too high, you actually lose the benefit of the acceleration and power and force generation that plyometrics can give you, and you move it into muscular endurance, which is totally fine. If that's the goal, I have versions of high volume plyometrics in the program, because you're doubling over a little bit of force acceleration with endurance, so that you're building up the I call it, again, west of Ireland slang, you're building up the miles in your legs, you're building up the reps in your legs, so that you're able to get into the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of a game, and when other people are fatiguing and tiring, you're still able to go. You're able to take off, you've got the endurance, you've got the muscular strength, etc. So that, again, it depends on context here. But too much is a very common mistake, especially if you're working for pure performance. If you've got secondary goals, building muscle, losing body fat, increasing muscular endurance, etc., yeah, you're going to make the adjustments on the rep ranges. You can go with 15 reps, 20 reps, etc. But if you're looking to just optimize force generation, power, you're looking at 3 to 5 reps, vertical jumps, broad jumps, so jumping far into the ahead of your body, or landing from a box into a broad jump, or doing that with one leg and then landing on a single leg, you're going to be working 3 to 5 reps with potentially 60 to 90 seconds or even a 2-minute rest. So you're working for pure, think of it like a sprinter. You're working in a very similar way. Now, you're not going to get the secondary benefits as much from that. It's a long rest period between, but you're working pure for the vertical leap or the vertical jump up, and then your program is based around that. So you're going to be doing a lot of glute activation work. You're going to be doing a lot of banded work. You're going to be getting your body ready with basic plyometric movements like normal jumps on a box or single legs, just pogo hops, doing those to get warmed up and then building into your 3 to 5 reps on whatever the vertical or max jump is. The other side of it is not doing enough, and that's generally reflected by or seen as doing the wrong or incorrect style programming. And we've all done this, myself included, where you go in and you do more of a bro split. You go in and you train your chest, you train your shoulders, you train your arms, you train your back, and you're not doing enough plyometrics. As I mentioned, it's a Goldilocks zone. The danger is in the dose here. Plyometrics are one of those. Similar to a deadlift, they can be a little bit high risk. And in online programs, I like them, but I like to keep them more basic and keep the volume a little bit higher. Generally, the only people I would ever do specific pure plyometrics with is when I'm working one-to-one online coaching with somebody, just because you need to be tracking the form, you need to be tracking how the body is recovering between it, and just the injury risk of excessive or probably not excessive, difficult plyometric moves is high, similar to a deadlift. A great movement. Most GAA players will do a trap bar deadlift because the risk of injury is considerably lower, but a traditional deadlift is a great movement, but the risk to reward isn't always the best because it's very high risk of injury. Even if you perform 8 reps perfectly or 6 reps perfectly or 4 reps perfectly and you go through the last one and you just tweak your back a little bit, that can put you out for weeks, potentially months. So plyometrics can be similar, so just proceed with caution. What I'd say here is you want to have a combination of side-to-side plyometrics, lateral plyometrics, single leg plyometrics, and then double leg plyometrics potentially on a box. But again, lots of examples of this on my Instagram, on my TikTok, on my YouTube. You can check those out so that you're actually able to see how to perform those movements correctly. Last question, number 5. I'll be 34 this season. The body isn't like it used to be. Any tips? Yes, I totally get this, because from the age of 31 on, I found personally for me, and I'm a big recovery geek, that it's very important to look after your nutrition, recovery, training, but more than you did probably a decade earlier, because if you don't, you're going to see that you're not performing at your best because your recovery is poorer between sessions, or your risk of injury will go way up because of the elasticity in your muscle just isn't as good as it was a decade ago. I will talk through what I recommend here and what I do personally, because I think that could be of quite a lot of value, because every individual context is different. When you're looking at your overall nutrition, you're not going to be able to tolerate the same amount of not supportive food that you did a decade ago. And that's normally in the form of processed foods, excessive sugars, or potentially alcohol. Things that when you were 22, 23, 24, you could go out on a night out on Friday, play a game on Sunday and actually not be too bad, or go out on a night out one weekend, play a championship the next weekend and not be too bad. That's nearly a non-runner for most athletes in their 30s. So generally considering really scaling back on alcohol, even just to optimize testosterone, because what happens with alcohol, there's 2 kind of primary issues in terms of how it affects men particularly. One is it's a displacing agent for vitamins, meaning that your certain vitamins that your body needs, your zinc, which will be a precursor for testosterone, they're displacing agents. So when you're drinking and eating meals, you're not absorbing the nutrients the same way as you would if you didn't consume alcohol. The second is its impact on estrogen levels, which is when you have excessive estrogen in your body, it negatively impacts your testosterone levels, which is what you want to optimize in your 30s as an athlete. So maybe minimize your alcohol. Sugar is the other side. If you've ever, and this again, this didn't happen to me until I was 32 or 33, where you'll have a bit of sugar binge. You'll go and have a Ben and Jerry's or a load of chocolate, and you wake up the next day and your joints are sore because of the inflammation in your joints, in your knees, your ankles, your elbows, etc. That's something that seems to get more prominent every year that passes. So you want to be a little bit more mindful of your sugar intake with food. With your training, you need to look at more flexibility work and more things that are going to support overall performance by releasing your hips and just releasing your body from its tightness in general. One of the advantages of being an older athlete, and I talked about this in a very popular episode on the GAA Lean Body podcast about things I'm doing as a 34-year-old GAA player that I didn't do when I was 24, the last time I played a full season or was playing properly. I was looking at my training and knowing that I had things like strength covered because I've been doing S&C gym work for years. I was also older, and you're coming up against younger athletes. So you generally, as a 34-year-old athlete, 32, 33, 34, 35, you're going to be stronger than the average player, particularly one who's a decade younger than you in most cases, not all, but in most. So that means that you don't have to do as much strength work as you needed to a decade ago. So you can do more mobility, you can do more flexibility, you can do more things like Cossack squats or lateral lunges, you can do more plyometrics and give yourself that break and that long rest period so you're able to optimize it. You can practice more with your landing and twisting and turning. You can do a lot more of this yourself compared to going in and doing a bench press and doing a trap bar and doing a medicine ball twist and doing a side plank. All those movements that are great and are the foundation of a lot of decent S&C programs, but you may not need that now. You may need the mobility, you may need the flexibility. So looking at your Pilates, looking at your yoga, looking at your performance-based movements that are combining several exercises in once, your Cossack squats, your deep squat with curls. Some of these movement patterns I put on functional workouts on my pages as well, so you can check those out. Your spider push-ups, so you're sitting deep into a hip stretch at the bottom of each rep. These are all movements that will build strength or maintain strength, but also increase your flexibility and your mobility. So you want to look at that. The last one then, well actually the last two, it's going to be your sleep and your supplements. So your sleep now takes a higher priority than it once did. Again, I remember this when I was playing 24, 25. I could go out on a night out, have 3-4 hours of sleep and play a game the next day and I'd be fine. I'd be a little bit tired, but I'd be fine. I'd have a cup of coffee and I'd be good to go. Whereas if you try and do that in your 30s, it's a non-runner. Best case scenario, you play terrible because you feel terrible. Worst case scenario, you get a pretty bad injury because your body's just not ready for that. So you want to look at your sleep quality and your warm-ups before those games. If you are in your 30s and you have any sort of risk of injury or history of injury, apologies, you need to be warming up more than normal. You can't just go out and kick around the ball straight away. You need to go on the bike. You need to do some glute activation, some adductor activation, so that those muscle groups that you want firing on the pitch are firing. 23, 24, 25-year-olds can go straight out on the pitch, kick around the ball, go straight into the warm-up. Most 30-year-old players plus can't do that. They need a little bit of extra warm-up compression gear, warming up in the gym beforehand, or doing some bodyweight stuff and stretching and getting glutes and adductors activated before they go onto the pitch. That's another add-on that I forgot to put in. And then the last is your supplementation. Supplements are useful all the way through, to be honest. In my GAA Lean Body program, I've got creatine in there, beta-alanine is in there for some players, green tea extract, like carnitine is in there for other players, with fat loss as a primary goal alongside performance. But when you're getting older, you're looking at things like your omega-3s and your probiotics. Your omega-3s for the anti-inflammatory response, your probiotics for your digestion, so that you're able to optimize the food that you're actually eating by having good, decent gut bacteria in your stomach, and your recovery between sessions. That might mean you're adding in something like a CBD oil or a magnesium before bed so that you're able to sleep better, because what will happen as your natural growth hormone goes down as we age, sleep quality can go down. So you're trying to optimize that. So things like your magnesium can support that, relaxing your central nervous system before bed. Your CBD oil, in terms of the receptors in the body for sleep, can help you fall asleep and stay asleep. So you're looking at these other little hacks that are going to improve overall performance. And then, as I mentioned, your omega-3, and if you have a history of injury, potentially glucosamine or chondroitin. Glucosamine for synovial fluid in the joint if you've got any issues with knees, elbows, etc. Your chondroitin for reducing your overall inflammation in the body. Again, takes a little bit of while to work, but can be useful if you're planning to use it for the entire season. So add in your supplements on top of your sleep, on top of your training, on top of your nutrition, and even if you're 34, 35, 36, 37, you're going to still be able to perform potentially at your best, because you have all the years of experience, you have a little bit of foundational strength built. You're just looking to keep up with the younger lads and, to be honest, more so not get injured because of that reduced or increased risk of injury due to the reduced elasticity in the muscle as we get older. So keep that in mind as well. that's everything from today's bonus Q&A podcast. There's no editing on this show, so it's going straight up, just literally recording with the microphone going up. So hopefully it helped a lot. As I mentioned, if you're a GAA player and you've listened to this and you got value and you're not subscribed to the GAA Lean Body program or GAA Lean Body podcast, apologies, go check that out. The link is in the description above. And if you're listening to this before January 20th and you want to work with me in my pre-season GAA Lean Body program, the link for that will also be in the description above. Thank you so much for listening. Have an amazing day, and I'll catch you soon.